Come along for my dead winter garden tour, said no gardener ever. But it's a great time for planning, and I want to remember the garden while it's empty or at least full of dead crops, so I can compare it to the spring and summer when it's full and lush and growing. Come see what I've got planned for 2025. This is a map that I use every year of my garden and its layout, and I fill it in with what I'm going to plant and where. But this means very little on paper. I thought I would show you around and give you a visual of the actual gardening beds, and then I'll have pictures to compare later on in the summer. If you haven't been here before, this will make sense when I show you around the garden, but all of the beds in white that border the garden, I call them my wall beds because it creates a wall around the garden. So that's why they have a W in front of the number, and my beds are numbered. And the blue beds are all ground beds. That's why they have a G on them. So as I'm filling this out, I'm also at the same time filling in one sheet for ground beds and one sheet for the wall beds. And this just kind of keeps me on track for what month I need to be putting stuff in, what month they come out, what's going to go in the bed next, when the bed should be empty, and that gives me a visual, even now in January of 2025, of what beds I'm going to have clear for planting when July and August come, and even again in the fall, so I know where I can put my garlic for next winter. Now, I personally enjoy planning. I enjoy it too much, probably. I plan things that never happen. I also don't always stick to the plans. I can go with the flow. I can give up my plans very easily and switch things around. But I like to at least have a plan to start with. That way I'm not going to miss a crop by accident. I might miss a crop on purpose, but I don't have to miss it by accident. Now, I've had so many crops here in the last 10 years. I cannot guarantee I can even remember what I had in this bed last year because every year I switch things around a little bit. And so I lose track. I think last year I had potatoes in these beds, and I had squash growing on this trellis and some black beans further down, but we're not here to worry about 2024. We're talking about what's going to go in 2025. All right, what we have in front of us are ground beds 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. That's how those are numbered. So this is the main gate. I'm standing right here and I'm looking at these beds. These are ground beds 1 through 8. And these little curves are the arches that I have between those two rows. And here's what I plan on putting in the first two beds right in front of us. Ground beds 1 and 2. I will be using the round tomato cages elsewhere. But in these two beds here, 1 and 2, and then 7 and 8 down there, once I clean all the black beans off, I am going to see about growing the tomatoes straight up these trellises because the indeterminate ones will keep growing. And usually when they get to the top of my 5-foot round tomato cages, they're spilling over and they're not very happy. So I'm going to see about growing them straight up there. But of course the tomatoes won't go in until April or even early May. So before the tomatoes go in, I'm going to have peas on these 4 arches. And this was Trail of Tears black beans that were on here last year. So I've got to clean those out. So in about a month, maybe 6 weeks, I will be putting in English peas on these trellises for an early crop. And then as those die off, I will rip them out. And even before I rip them out, I can plant the tomatoes at the bottom of the trellises to start going up. Also in the spring, I'm going to have carrots on the outer side away from the trellis. And at the end of the bed, I'm going to put in some parsley. The same here with ground bed 2. We'll start out with peas on the trellis, carrots in the soil a little bit after, and then end of April, early May, tomatoes will go on the trellis with some parsley down at the end. It'll be the same in these two beds, ground bed 7 and 8, except instead of parsley on these ends, I'm going to have some basil plants. So out of these beds, I'm actually going to get 4 different crops this season. I'm going to hold it upside down so you can see. We're looking up the hill. See all my dead plants? Such an embarrassing winter garden. But ground beds 3, 4, 5, and 6 are just going to be onions and tomatoes this year. So I will put the round cages, 4 at least, maybe 5 if I'm feeling frisky and I want to risk the plants not being happy. I'll be happy with 4 though, because if I can get 4 tomato plants in each of these beds, I will have 32 tomato plants in this section. But wait, there's more. So I will have onions in these 4 beds sometime in March, and then the tomatoes will go in end of April, early May. Now we'll come down the little hill here to look at ground beds 9 and 10. These are wider, longer, deeper beds. Deep and wide. All right, so the one in front of us, ground bed 9, we are going to be starting with potatoes. So that is going to be a lot of potato plants. I grew potato plants in this bed 2 years ago at this end, and they loved it. They grew really well because the soil is nice and deep and loose. So we're going to start with potatoes, and those will come out midsummer. And then by July, I'll be putting in winter squash to fill this whole bed. So that'll be the life of ground bed 9. I'm going to walk in my bed over here to ground bed 10. And this is going to be all cauliflower this spring. The seeds of which I am starting today on January 30th. Hopefully it's not too early. But I would like to fill this whole bed with cauliflower plants. And when those are done in May or June, then I will put in watermelon. Gonna have a late watermelon harvest that comes in later in the fall. All right, from 9 and 10, we are walking down. We can see ground beds 11 and 12 in front of us. Ground bed 11 currently has our winter garlic. Of course, it was lovely and happy in the fall, but we've had a very cold winter. So the garlic is still here, it's still alive. Garlic can actually handle being knocked back by cold weather to the ground and regrow itself. So in another couple of months, this will be lovely and full of garlic. And when the garlic is done and pulled this summer, it might rest, the bed might rest for maybe 4 weeks. And then I'm going to be putting in my fall cauliflower. That will go in July, August at the latest for a fall cauliflower harvest. And ground bed 12, currently empty, is going to have more tomatoes. I think last year I fit 10 or 12 tomato plants, maybe 14 in these long beds. And then there'll also be basil between the tomato plants. And this will become the garlic bed in the fall of 2025 for the 2026 harvest. So once these tomatoes are taken out, we will put garlic back in around September. Ground beds 13 and 14, they are both going to start out with potatoes in the spring. Whole length, both these ground beds. And then once the potatoes are done, in July, August, we'll be putting fall cauliflower in this bed right here closest to me, and fall broccoli in the bed up above. I like to have a lot more space for broccoli and cauliflower in the fall. I do grow them both in the spring and the fall, but there's almost no bug pressure in the fall, and they grow so much nicer. You get a really good clean harvest as long as you get them started in time. They really have to be started in July, first week of August at the latest. And that's it for the ground beds. Let's go ahead and walk back up to wall bed 1 and take a look up there. Seeing all my dead stuff, seeing all my hoses and buckets and tools. I'm not a clean gardener, I'll admit it, but I grow food. All right. So now we're going to start with the clear boxes that go around the ground beds. Those are my wall beds. And this is wall bed 1. If you've been here for a while, you've seen me grow potatoes in here, green beans. Last year was sweet potatoes. They did a really terrific job. This spring and March, I'm going to be putting in spinach, lettuce, and kale. Is going to fill this bed up. And then when it gets too hot for them and they are taken out, then in July, I will be putting in winter squash. Wall bed 2 doesn't have a divider, so depending on what you plant here, it can wrap around. So like last year, I had to keep stopping the sweet potatoes from invading that direction. But right now, it's got my dead leftover cauliflower plants in it from the fall. Those were just plants that didn't grow big enough in time before the frost, so they never got a head on them. And that bed is going to start with potatoes also, either white or red potatoes, and then also be given over to winter squash in the fall, because since I know I'm going to have winter squash here, I might as well just have more winter squash all the way down wall bed 2. So remember, I'm going to have tomatoes in these 8 beds. I'm going to put my Roma tomatoes here this year. Last year I grew my Roma tomatoes way down there in that corner, and I loved it, because if you've ever picked many Roma tomatoes, you know you almost have to like lay on the ground and get up underneath the plants to get all the tomatoes, especially when they're first flowering and ripening from the bottom. And I love last year having the Romas in the wall. I had them in like full 5-foot tall tomato cages, because they will grow too big for those little small cages you find at like Tractor Supply and stuff. But I will put the tomato cages in this wall and have, looks like I can fit at least 6, maybe even 8 Roma tomato plants here, just to have in this area. It makes the picking so much easier. And I'm also going to have a few onions in the spring. This is wall bed 3 that we're looking at. I'm going to have a few onions with the Roma tomatoes here. All right, if my dog will stop barking, we can finish this video. While we're here, that's a wood chip pile, a mushroom compost pile, and a pile for burning for little bonfires to enjoy. It's been so cold in the last month. We actually haven't been out here, but we were out here a lot in the fall having fires with friends. But this is the leftover broccoli plants that did not handle the 5 and under degree nights that we had. I had already gotten all of the fruit off of them that was available. But once this is emptied and refilled with some compost, there's going to be potatoes in here for the spring, white or red potatoes. And after that, I'll probably do cucumbers, maybe something else, because we definitely don't eat enough cucumbers to justify filling this whole bed with them. But that's all I could think of so far. These are a strawberry variety that I planted last spring. I would have to look back on a video to know which variety it is. They are everbearing. The bed sank down a lot. I never got to this bed in order to transplant anything. So we're just going to see what this looks like in the spring. We'll throw some soil on top and the good strong plants will come up through. And that's just going to stay strawberries this year. All right, coming to wall bed 6. I'm leaving this open for flowers. It's got some spinach. This is what didn't survive because the nights were so cold. It doesn't matter what kind of frost protection you have. When it goes down to 5 degrees Fahrenheit or less at night, nothing's going to survive anyway. But I will just poke that around a little bit, put some compost on top, and those are going to have peas also this summer. I'm going to get, not this summer, I'm so distracted, in the spring. I'm going to get some more of the little small TP trellises to put the peas on there. And when the peas are done, this will be the bed that we have sweet potatoes in this summer. My love is home. We're going out for an early Valentine's dinner this afternoon, this evening, so looking forward to that. Wall bed 8, this bottom corner here, we are going to be putting in some late spinach and kale around May, and lettuce. Now here's my reasoning. Yes, a wall bed will dry out and need a lot more watering, But this corner of the garden also gets shade first in the afternoon. So we've got east over there, and it goes west over there, south. But then I have these big tall trees here. And so everything on this end of the garden gets shaded first in the afternoon. And I'm gonna hope that the spinach and kale and lettuce, if I keep it watered, can stay a little cooler here. It's an experiment. If it doesn't work, that's all right. But I had the empty bed space, so I wanted to try. Coming around to wall bed 9. This had potatoes last spring, and I don't remember what was in here in the fall. Oh, I had watermelon. I had a terrific fall watermelon harvest in this bed last year. But this spring, it's going to be zucchini intermixed with green beans. I am the biggest fan of green beans in my house. No one else likes them that much, so I don't need to grow as many as I have been growing the last few years. I'm still eating canned green beans from 2023. I haven't even started into my 2024 canned green beans yet, so I don't need to grow that many. But that'll be watermelon and green beans. This ground is crunchy. There's like, you hear that? Frozen. It's like frozen water and ice there. All right, got some dead kale here for us. I'm going to leave this bed for flowers. Here are some tomato cages I haven't cleaned up. Wall bed 11 has some almost dead spinach. This will actually come back pretty nicely in the spring, so I'm leaving it. Get a little bit of harvest off of it before it bolts, and then I might even just let it go to seed to get the spinach seeds from it. Otherwise, this will have cucumbers in here on a TP trellis. They did well there. I think last spring, maybe it was spring before last. All right, this is a different variety of ever-bearing strawberry. This is my second variety. And you can see it multiplied like crazy since it was planted in the spring of 2024. The bed actually went all the way down to these brick. Like there were strawberries to here. And I cleaned out that many plants and used them to fill those metal beds with strawberries. Again, they're ever-bearing if I didn't say that. But those metal beds, I love using them for strawberries, and I look forward to picking from them again. I don't really want these strawberries here forever, but I don't have time to deal with it this year. I'm going to keep thinking about where I want them. I'm just going to let them grow this year. I might thin them a little bit. I do have to fill the bed up. So just by putting compost in the bed, it will take out some of the weaker plants, if there are weaker plants. I'm going to assume the strawberries might try to stretch down a little bit, but the rest of the bed for spring is going to be watermelon. You hear the chickens down there? Anyway, the rest of this bed is going to be watermelon plants, the earlier batch of watermelon. The ones that I'm going to have in the ground over there will be the late planting of watermelon for fall. That is our asparagus bed and the small metal ones. It's the big metal ones that have the strawberries. And this is the asparagus. I've got to get those tops chopped and dropped and refill the beds with compost in the next 4 weeks or so. So that's our asparagus. This is going to be watermelon. All right, coming around the corner. Where are we going now? This is wall bed 13, and that's going to be broccoli in the spring. And then carrots in the fall. Let me get you the real camera lens. All right, so like I said, I don't put a whole lot of effort into the spring broccoli and cauliflower, but I do try to plant it anyway just to get some harvest. This will be spring broccoli, and then when that's done, fall carrots will go in. I don't have anything labeled for this bed right now. It'll probably just be flowers. 14. Wall bed 15 is currently spinach, but that's also going to be spring broccoli and fall carrots. And then the corner is currently more spinach. I might let some of that go to seed. Actually, I'm going to let all of it go to seed because what I'm doing is over here with wall bed 17, it's currently my third variety of ever-bearing strawberries. And I'm going to go ahead and let them wrap around and take over the rest of this bed this year. I might actually take plants from the green stalk because that's the same variety strawberries as what's in this bed. I might go ahead and transplant them in here once I know which plants I'm going to leave for going to seed for spinach seeds. This is a nice picking height for the strawberries. It's why I like the metal beds down the hill also, because it's just like hip height, a little higher, and it's just so easy to pick strawberries. I love it. And the beds don't get wet. Like one year we had so much rain. The beds we used to have our strawberries into the ground, they were just slop, and the strawberries rotted. And I've never had that problem since we've had the raised beds. Of course, it does mean I have to water them a little more when it gets dry, but I never have to worry about too much rain in the spring ruining the plants. So this will be all strawberry bed, and this will be herbs. That sage plant I think is probably dead, but I will get some more in there. Maybe parsley. The rest of my herbs are up by the house, so I don't really put a whole lot in this garden other than basil and parsley. And these green stalks, you know, I have a love-hate relationship with them. Mostly hate. I don't know. I like them when they're newly planted with something. But I think I'm going to take most of these strawberries out, like I said, and transplant them elsewhere, whichever ones live through winter. And I'll probably just use this for some lettuce and spinach, maybe kale, spring and fall. That'll be about it. So that is my dead winter garden tour. And I look forward to watching what God grows in there this year with my help. Talk to you later. Hope you have a great day. To see some of our mistakes in gardening and how we've changed the style of our garden over the last 10 years, check out this video.